So Tom Parker Bowles was allegedly found inside Sandringham, and the version of events that followed is being described as something the royal family hasn't witnessed in years. Not a carefully worded statement, released through palisades, not a diplomatic exchange smoothed over with polite language and strategic silence, something much more raw, much more direct, and much more personal. And when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the whole situation reveals a fault line that's been cracking open inside the monarchy for a while now. Before we get into it, if you enjoy deep dives into royal drama, hit that subscribe button and join us here at Crown Watch. We break down all the palace intrigues so you don't miss a thing. So here's where this gets interesting. Sources suggest Prince William's reaction when he found out Tom Parker Bowles was on the Sandringham grounds wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't immediate shouting or some explosive outburst. According to people familiar with the situation, William went completely still, like the kind of still that's more unsettling than yelling. Then he asked one question, delivered quietly, almost conversationally, in that particular tone that people who know William well recognize as his most dangerous register. He asked who had authorized the visit. The answer he got back didn't trace to anyone on his team. It didn't go through William's household at all. The alleged authorization came from somewhere else entirely, from someone considerably closer to Sandringham's current legal owner, from inside King Charles's orbit. And that specific detail, that the permission didn't come from William or anyone connected to William, is apparently what transformed his controlled stillness into something altogether different. Now, to understand why this matters so much, you have to understand what Sandringham actually represents to William, not as a tourist landmark or a line in a royal biography, but as a place. Sandringham House sits on 8,000 acres of Norfolk countryside. The royal family has owned it privately since 1862. Purchased originally for the Prince of Wales, who became King Edward VII, it has never been crown property, never been government administered, always been personal, passing from monarch to monarch through inheritance rather than through any constitutional process. Queen Elizabeth inherited it from her father, King George VI. She spent every single Christmas of her 70-year reign there, without exception. King George V loved it so completely that he called it the place he loved best in the world and actually died there in January 1936. When Elizabeth died at Balmoral in September 2022, Sandringham passed immediately and automatically to Charles. When Charles eventually dies, it passes to William, and that inheritance chain matters enormously for understanding William's alleged reaction, because William doesn't experience Sandringham as some property he'll one day own in a distant abstract future. He experiences it as a property he's already responsible for protecting. His Christmas memories are Norfolk memories, his recollections of the royal family gathered privately away from cameras and protocol, and the performance demands of public life for Sandringham recollections. He was there for the Sandringham Summit in January 2020, when Harry and Meghan's decision to step back from royal duties forced the most significant internal royal negotiation in recent memory. Elizabeth chose Sandringham for that meeting deliberately. It's where the family addresses serious matters without outside interference. For William, that's not history, it's lived experience. Sources suggest that protectiveness has been evident to Sandringham staff for some time. The attention William pays to who accesses the estate, the questions he allegedly asks when unfamiliar names appear in connection with the property, the particular alertness of a man who understands that what happened at Balmoral could happen anywhere if the underlying assumption driving it remained unaddressed. And that underlying assumption is the real problem here. The assumption that proximity to Charles creates access to the spaces Charles owns. That being the Queen Consort's son carries an implicit permission that doesn't require explicit authorization from anyone else. That the gray zone Camilla's marriage that Charles created extends to wherever Charles's private life extends. Balmoral should have ended that assumption completely. The alleged commercial access violations, the alleged elite paying clients, Princess Anne's legal response, William's immediate alignment with her, the permanent access restrictions, all of it should have communicated something unambiguous to Tom Parker Bowles about where the boundaries of that gray zone actually lie. Sources suggest the message was received. Sources suggest Tom Parker Bowles understood it, which makes his alleged presence at Sandringham extraordinarily difficult to explain as a genuine misunderstanding of where he was or whether he was welcome. The explanation, sources suggest, lies not in Tom Parker Bowles misreading William's position, but in something that allegedly happened between Tom Parker Bowles and King Charles in the months between the Balmoral situation and that gray Norfolk morning. Something that allegedly gave Tom Parker Bowles a confidence about his access to Sandringham that was not authorized by William, not sanctioned through William's household, and not consistent with anything William had communicated about his position on Camilla's family and private royal estates. That gap between the access Tom Parker Bowles allegedly believed he had and the access William was prepared to tolerate is precisely what produced a confrontation. And here's the thing. This isn't the first time William has drawn a line regarding Camilla's family. There's a documented moment that royal watchers consistently identify as the first clear signal of what William intended to do with the institutional authority he inherited. It didn't involve a press conference or a formal announcement. It involved a name disappearing from a financial document that most people never read. Annabel Elliott, Camilla's younger sister, an interior designer of considerable professional reputation, had been on the Duchy of Cornwall payroll for nearly 20 years under Charles. Paid between £19,000 and £82,000 annually, depending on the scale of projects she managed across duchy properties, the moment William inherited the duchy following Elizabeth's death in September 2022, Annabel Elliott's name stopped appearing in the published financial accounts. No announcement, no dispute placed on any public record, no explanation offered through any official channel. Royal commentator Emmy Griffiths noted it directly at the time, observing that Annabel had been working across duchy properties under Charles and that William had removed her once he took control. Griffiths described the reaction inside royal circles as causing significant ripples. That removal established something important. Not simply that William was prepared to remove Camilla-connected figures from the institutional spaces he controlled, but how he was prepared to do it. Quietly, decisively, without creating the kind of paper trail or public record that gives the affected party anything solid to push back against. He didn't announce his intention. He acted, and by the time the removal was publicly noted, it was already irreversible. William replaced Annabel Elliott with his own people, his friends, the godparents of his children, people whose loyalty traces entirely to William rather than to anyone Charles married. The message required no elaboration. This is my institution. These are my decisions. And proximity to it flows through me, not through my father's wife. Then came Balmoral. Sources suggest Tom Parker Bowles allegedly accessed the Balmoral estate during a period when no authorized royal visit was on the schedule. Sources further suggest the alleged access was connected to commercial arrangements. Elite paying clients allegedly offered private access to the late Queen's personal sanctuary for significant fees. The exclusivity of a space that the entire world knows exists, but virtually nobody outside the royal family ever sees from the inside, allegedly monetized without authorization. When Princess Anne allegedly discovered what had happened, her response was not a family conversation. It was not a quiet word delivered at a private gathering designed to address the matter without creating a record. She went directly to legal counsel, bypassing Charles entirely, moving before anyone in Camilla's circle had an opportunity to manage the situation through the informal palace diplomacy that has absorbed so many uncomfortable royal realities over the years. William aligned with Anne immediately. Sources are consistent on this point. His support for Anne's position was total and without the diplomatic hedging that normally characterizes internal royal disagreements. He stood with her completely, and the access restrictions that followed, sources describe as permanent rather than temporary, a closing of the door rather than a warning that the door might close. The combination of those two documented situations, the Annabel Elliott removal and the Balmoral response, established a pattern that sources suggest should have been unmistakable to anyone paying attention. William draws lines. He communicates them through actions rather than words, and once the lines are drawn, he does not redraw them in more generous positions when the person who crossed them expresses frustration or seeks reconsideration through Charles. So given that pattern, given those specific documented situations, given the clarity of the message they collectively sent about William's position on Camilla's family and private royal spaces, why does the alleged Sandringham situation suggest those lines were allegedly crossed again? Sources suggest the answer requires understanding something about the dynamic between Tom Parker Bowles and King Charles that existed independently of anything William communicated about his own position. Charles has always had a genuine warmth toward Camilla's children. This isn't simply the public performance of a man accepting his second wife's family for the sake of marital harmony. Sources who have observed their private interactions consistently describe something more authentic than that. Charles genuinely likes Tom Parker Bowles. He finds him good company. He appreciates his intelligence, his social ease, and his professional accomplishments in a world, the culinary and literary world, that Charles himself has genuine interest in. That warmth predates Charles's kingship. It developed across years of family life before Camilla ever sat beside Charles at a state occasion, and it has continued through everything that has happened between William and Camilla's family since Charles became king. Sources suggest Charles has never fully internalized William's position on Camilla's family as a hard boundary that applies even to his own private life and his own private properties. He understands intellectually that William has concerns. He has heard those concerns expressed. But sources suggest Charles experiences Sandringham as his home, his private space, his refuge, where he has the right to invite whoever he chooses, including apparently his stepson. Sources suggest the alleged authorization for Tom Parker Bowles' presence at Sandringham on that Norfolk morning traces back to a conversation between Tom Parker Bowles and Charles that did not go through William's household and did not seek William's approval because Charles did not believe William's approval was required for a guest at his own private estate. That assumption, sources suggest, is precisely where Charles and William's understanding of the situation allegedly diverges most completely. William does not experience Sandringham as simply Charles's private property, where Charles's guest preferences apply without reference to anyone else. He experiences it as the property he will inherit as part of the institutional landscape he is already responsible for protecting, as a space where the same principles that govern access to the duchy and to Balmoral should apply with equal firmness. That divergence between Charles's view and William's view of who controls Sandringham's guest list produced the specific gap that Tom Parker Bowles allegedly walked into on that gray Norfolk morning. Not because Tom Parker Bowles misunderstood William's position, but because he allegedly had authorization from someone whose position on the matter was completely different. And because that authorization, sources suggest, was not something William had any idea existed until his protection detail made that radio call, Tom Parker Bowles didn't arrive at Sandringham as a stranger forcing his way through a gate. He arrived, sources suggest, as someone who had been moving through royal spaces with increasing familiarity across the years of his mother's marriage to the king, someone whose presence at certain royal occasions had become normalized to the point where the question of whether he belonged in a particular space had stopped feeling like a question that required a formal answer. That normalization didn't happen accidentally. It happened gradually through a process that sources describe as deliberate on Camilla's part and entirely genuine on Charles's. Understanding how that process unfolded is essential to understanding how the alleged Sandringham situation became possible, because the confidence Tom Parker Bowles allegedly brought to that Norfolk morning wasn't manufactured from nothing. It was built across years of integration into a royal family that, under Charles's reign, had been slowly but consistently making room for Camilla's children in ways that had no real precedent in modern royal history. Tom Parker Bowles is 50 years old. He has built a genuinely respected career as a food writer and critic entirely on his own professional merits. His cookbooks have received serious critical attention. His restaurant criticism has been published in significant outlets. His social circle in London encompasses people whose connection to him is professional and personal, rather than royal adjacent. He is, by most accounts, charming, well-read, and comfortable in rooms ranging from Michelin-starred restaurants to literary gatherings to the kind of high society events where old money and new culture intersect in the particular way that defines certain London circles. He is also, by his own admission in various interviews across the years, someone who has thought carefully about his unusual position. He is not royal. He has never pretended to be royal. He has spoken publicly about the strange experience of watching his mother marry the king while maintaining his own entirely separate identity and career. But that separate identity exists within a context that makes true separation practically impossible, because Camilla didn't simply marry Charles. She became queen consort, and the institutional weight of that position extended outward in ways that affected everyone connected to her, including Tom Parker Bowles. His name began appearing on guest lists for significant royal occasions after the 2023 coronation. His presence at certain events was noted by royal watchers who track attendance at such occasions with forensic attention. He moved through spaces connected to royal life with a visibility that would have been unthinkable for a private citizen without a specific family connection. Sources suggest Camilla's role in that gradual integration was intentional. She wanted her children to have a recognized place within the family she had joined. Not official roles, not titles, simply the kind of acknowledged presence that a mother who has reached the highest position in the country might reasonably want for her children. Charles supported that intention completely. His warmth toward Tom Parker Bowles and his sister Laura Parker Bowles has been visible in private settings across years of family life. Sources describe Charles as genuinely fond of both of them in a way that goes beyond the performed acceptance of a man being diplomatic about his wife's children. He likes them. He finds their company genuinely enjoyable. He has welcomed them into his private life with an openness that sources describe as entirely unforced. Under Charles's protection, that welcome extended to royal properties, invitations to family gatherings at the estates Charles owns, occasions where the distinction between Charles's private family and the official royal family becomes deliberately blurred because Charles chooses to blur it. Sandringham was part of that picture. Not as a permanent fixture, not as regular unsupervised access, but as a space Tom Parker Bowles had allegedly visited under Charles's hospitality often enough that its familiarity was genuine rather than performed. And therein, sources suggest, lies the precise problem. Because the integration Camilla built under Charles's protection was always conditional on Charles's continued capacity to sanction it. It was not built with William's acceptance as its foundation. It was built with Charles's authority as its ceiling. When Charles was in full health and full authority, that ceiling was high enough to accommodate everything Camilla's integration required. As Charles's health has declined and William's institutional authority has expanded, that ceiling has been dropping. The Duchy decisions demonstrated it. The Balmoral response confirmed it, but sources suggest Charles did not fully internalize what those signals meant for his own private decisions about his own private properties. He continued operating on the assumption that Sandringham was his home and that his guest preferences at his home were his own business. Sources suggest that assumption produced a private conversation between Charles and Tom Parker Bowles in the months following the Balmoral situation that Tom Parker Bowles allegedly interpreted as restoring his access to royal spaces through Charles's personal invitation. Even where William's institutional position had allegedly closed it, Charles, sources suggest, may not have understood that he was allegedly doing that. He may have experienced the conversation as simply arranging a private family visit to his private home. But the consequence, sources suggest, was Tom Parker Bowles arriving at Sandringham on a gray Norfolk morning with a confidence about his welcome that had no basis in anything William had communicated, and walking directly into the most explosive confrontation Camilla's family has faced yet. Charles was not at Sandringham when it happened. Sources suggest he was at Clarence House managing his treatment schedule when the call came through, not from William's team, not through official palace channels that would have given him time to prepare a response before the situation was already in motion, but from Camilla. Sources describe her call as arriving within an hour of the alleged confrontation, her voice, according to those familiar with the conversation, carrying something sources describe as a combination of fury and something harder to name. The particular anguish of a mother whose son has just been subjected to a confrontation she finds both disproportionate and deeply humiliating, and the particular frustration of a wife who knows that the person responsible for that confrontation is her husband's son, the man who will one day be king, the man Charles loves above almost anyone, the man Charles cannot bring himself to fully confront even when the situation allegedly demands it. Charles listened. Sources suggest he said very little during that initial call. He expressed empathy. He acknowledged Camilla's distress. He told her he would speak to William. What happened when he allegedly spoke to William is the detail that sources describe as revealing the true state of the power dynamic inside the palace more clearly than anything that has emerged in months. Charles's position in this specific situation is more complicated than any previous iteration of the impossible geometry sources have described throughout this story. At Balmoral, the estate in question was inherited by Charles and will eventually pass to William. Charles had institutional distance from the situation. He could observe Anne's legal response and William's alignment with her without being required to take a personal position on whether his stepson's alleged behavior had violated his own hospitality. Sandringham is different. Charles owns Sandringham right now. Whatever alleged authorization Tom Parker Bowles had for his presence on those grounds on that Norfolk morning traces back, sources suggest, to Charles himself, to a private conversation, to Charles operating on the assumption that his home is his home and his guests are his business, which means that William's eruption was not simply directed at Tom Parker Bowles, it was directed, at least implicitly, at a decision Charles made. Sources suggest Charles understood that immediately when Camilla's call reached him, and sources suggest that understanding made the call he subsequently made to William considerably more difficult than any previous conversation between them about Camilla's family. Because Charles couldn't argue William's position was wrong without arguing that his own decision to allegedly invite Tom Parker Bowles to Sandringham was right. And arguing that his decision was right required him to assert that his authority over his own private property supersedes William's position on who accesses royal estates, which is technically correct as a matter of current legal ownership and practically meaningless as a matter of where institutional authority inside the palace actually sits in 2026. Charles is 76 years old. He is managing an active cancer diagnosis. He became king at 73, the oldest succession in British history, after waiting longer than any heir in recorded royal history for a role that defined his entire existence. He has carried the weight of that reign with a dedication that deserves genuine acknowledgement regardless of any other dimension of his complicated story. But dedication and authority are different things. And sources suggest Charles's capacity to exercise authority against William's position on any matter connected to the monarchy's future has diminished to the point where the exercise itself has become largely theoretical. William controls the duchy. William has extended royal warrant authority. William is, by the documented account of multiple royal commentators, effectively running the monarchy's crisis management strategy while Charles manages his treatment. Royal commentator Maureen Callahan told the Daily Mail that Charles had all but handed over the crown and preferred not to be involved even in matters that threaten the monarchy's future. That is the context within which Charles allegedly called William about the Sandringham situation, not as a king asserting his authority over his heir, but as a father trying to navigate an impossible situation between his wife and his son, between the family he built with Camilla and the son who was becoming everything Charles always hoped he would be, while simultaneously dismantling the access structure Camilla spent 20 years constructing. Sources suggest the conversation between Charles and William about the Sandringham confrontation was short. William was not aggressive toward his father. Sources are consistent on this point. Whatever eruption had allegedly occurred on the Sandringham grounds was not replicated in how William spoke to Charles, but he was clear. Sources describe William as expressing his position with the same quiet finality that characterizes everything he communicates when the subject is Camilla's family and royal spaces. Sandringham is Charles's now. When it passes to William, it will be managed according to William's standards without exception or negotiation. And even now, while it remains Charles's William's position on who should and should not be accessing it, is not a preference that Charles's guest invitations can override. He was not asking Charles to agree. He was informing Charles of his position. Sources suggest Charles did not argue back with a conviction that genuine disagreement would have required. He expressed discomfort. He noted that Sandringham is his home. He said something about family and about the importance of not allowing institutional disagreements to poison private life. William acknowledged all of it and maintained his position entirely. Sources describe the silence at the end of that exchange as the most significant moment in it. Not what was said, but what Charles did not say. He did not tell William his position was wrong. He did not assert that his authority as the reigning monarch required William to moderate his stance. He did not promise Camilla that he had addressed the situation in a way that would prevent it from happening again. He ended the call, and sources suggest he sat with what that silence meant for considerably longer than the call itself had lasted. Then came the conversation with Camilla that sources describe as the most difficult exchange between them in years, not because of anything William had said to Charles, but because of what Charles had allegedly failed to say. Camilla wanted a specific thing from Charles following that call. She wanted to hear that Charles had told William his behavior was unacceptable, that the eruption had been addressed, that some boundary had been drawn around William's alleged treatment of her son that would prevent a repeat of the confrontation. Sources suggest Charles could not give her that, not because he didn't love her, not because her distress wasn't real to him, but because giving it would have required him to believe something he allegedly does not fully believe, that William was wrong. And sources suggest Charles, who was present for the years of his first marriage, who knows what Diana endured, who understands why his son carries the grief he carries, cannot make himself believe that with the conviction Camilla needed him to express. His silence on that specific point communicated something to Camilla that no explicit statement could have delivered more clearly. And sources suggest Camilla heard it with a clarity that she found devastating. A week after the alleged Sandringham confrontation, Tom Parker Bowles attended a literary event in London. He was photographed arriving, smiling, well-dressed, the image of a man who writes about food for a living and moves through London's cultural world with the ease of someone entirely comfortable in his own skin. Nothing in those photographs suggested a man who had recently been at the center of the most explosive private confrontation inside the British royal family in years. Nothing indicated the alleged eruption, the alleged confrontation, the alleged conversation between Charles and William that sources describe as ending in a silence that communicated more than any words could have. Tom Parker Bowles went to a literary event and smiled for the cameras, and the British royal family went about its public business with the composed dignity it maintains regardless of what is allegedly happening behind closed doors. That gap between the public image and the private reality is the gap this whole situation reveals. Sources suggest the consequences of the alleged Sandringham situation for Tom Parker Bowles' relationship with royal spaces are significantly more severe than anything that followed Balmoral. The Balmoral situation produced access restrictions to a specific estate. Sources suggest the Sandringham situation has allegedly produced something broader, a fundamental reassessment by William's team of the entire framework through which Camilla's children have been accessing royal spaces and royal locations. Not a targeted response to a specific incident, but a structural response to a pattern. Two alleged access situations across two separate private royal estates involving the same person in a relatively compressed time frame is not, in William's assessment, according to sources, something that can be addressed through property-specific restrictions. It allegedly requires addressing the underlying assumption that produced both situations, the assumption that Charles's warmth toward Camilla's children translates into access rights that operate independently of William's institutional position. Sources suggest William has made clear through the appropriate internal channels that this assumption does not and will not apply to any private royal space he has current or future authority over, and that the list of spaces where he has current or future authority is considerably longer than the list where he does not. The duchy properties, Balmoral when it eventually passes to him, Sandringham when it eventually passes to him, the events and occasions managed through his household, the institutional circles where his people determine who is present and who is not. Tom Parker Bowles' alleged future access to all of those spaces, sources suggest, is now subject to a level of scrutiny that makes casual family visits of the kind that allegedly produced both the Balmoral and Sandringham situations effectively impossible. For Camilla, the consequences are harder to map because they operate on multiple dimensions simultaneously. The practical dimension is the narrowing sources have described: her inner circle allegedly reduced, her family's institutional access allegedly restricted, her information flow allegedly diminished, her capacity to manage situations before they become confrontations allegedly compromised by the removal of the network that made that management possible. The personal dimension is what sources describe as the most painful. Camilla is a mother. Whatever her complicated history with the institution she married into, whatever the legitimate criticisms of the choices she and Charles made during the years of his first marriage, she's a woman who loves her children and has spent 20 years trying to give them a recognized place within the extraordinary world her marriage to Charles created. Watching that place allegedly being dismantled, watching her son allegedly confronted on the grounds of an estate where his presence had previously been welcomed, watching Charles respond to the situation with a silence that communicated more than any explicit statement could have, sources suggest that specific combination of experiences has produced a shift in Camilla's private demeanor that people close to her describe as significant. Not defeat. Camilla is not a person who reaches defeat easily, but a recognition, a clear-eyed assessment of where things stand that is considerably less comfortable than the image she projects at official engagements. She understands that the protection Charles's reign provided for her family's integration is failing, not because Charles loves her less, but because Charles's capacity to enforce that protection against William's institutional authority is diminishing faster than either of them fully anticipated. And she understands that the trajectory of that diminishment points in one direction only. When Charles dies, Sandringham passes to William, Balmoral passes to William, the duchy is already William's. The institutional machinery of the monarchy is already operating largely according to William's priorities. The people in the key spaces are already largely William's people. Camilla will hold the title of Queen Dowager. She will likely inherit Clarence House and Highgrove. She will have financial security and a formal royal status that provides certain ceremonial protections. But the access, the proximity, the integration she built across 20 years of careful, patient network construction inside the most exclusive institution on earth, sources suggest she already knows that integration does not survive the transition. Then there's the question of what the alleged Sandringham confrontation means for the monarchy as an institution, because the blended family problem it allegedly produced isn't going away when this specific situation resolves. The British monarchy created an unprecedented dynamic when Charles married Camilla. Two families, separate histories, separate loyalties, separate understandings of where the boundaries lie and whose authority defines them, brought together under one constitutional roof by a marriage that the public took years to accept and that the family is still apparently navigating 20 years later. William's position on how that dynamic should be managed is now documented across multiple situations. He draws lines, he enforces them through institutional action rather than personal confrontation where possible. He builds the kingdom he intends to rule in the spaces where his authority currently extends and expands that authority methodically into the spaces where it does not yet fully apply. The alleged Sandringham eruption represents the moment where that methodology allegedly gave way to something more immediate and more human, where William's carefully maintained operational discipline allegedly broke under the weight of a situation that connected too directly to too many layers of history and grief and accumulated frustration. Sources suggest that break was noted by everyone who witnessed or heard about it, not simply as evidence of where William's limits lie, but as evidence of how close to those limits the situation inside the palace has already reached. The throne will pass when it passes. The formal transition will happen with all the constitutional weight and public ceremony the institution brings to its most significant moments. But sources suggest the two families sharing that throne are no longer sharing it equally. One family is consolidating, the other is contracting, and the alleged confrontation on a gray Norfolk morning is the moment that dynamic became impossible for anyone inside that palace to pretend they hadn't noticed. Tom Parker Bowles walked onto the Sandringham grounds, and William allegedly made sure everyone inside that palace understood exactly what that meant. Not through a press release, not through a carefully managed palace statement, but through a confrontation that sources describe as leaving absolutely no ambiguity about where the lines are drawn.